It is 11:15 on the East Coast. Welcome to Twitchline, everyone. Starting a little late today, so please excuse us. A lot of other casting commitments here on Twitch that keeps me busy, but welcome to Twitchline. I am your host, Hodahori. You can call me Z for short. Joined as always with my casting partner and best friend, Mr. Acorn, also known as Tim. How are you doing today, Tim?
Doing well, sir. Glad to be here this evening and looking forward to digging in with you.
Yeah. So let's get all the normal junk out of the way. We want to make sure that if you love our channel or you want to participate in our channel, you can please contact us here at twitchlinelove@gmail.com, or you can tweet us and follow us on Twitter at Twitchline. You can also go to our YouTube channel where we upload various videos. Our recordings of our live streams go onto YouTube so you can watch them at your leisure. So click on below. You can subscribe to the channel so that you know when in our YouTube channel when we upload new our videos. So if you want to watch specific videos from Twitch lines gone by, you can watch them down there. But also make sure you hit that follow button up at the top. That'll help us out a lot so that we will be able to show up here on Twitchline in the IRL. So get as many viewers as possible and build up a nice base so that we can start helping out everybody here on Twitch. So, Tim, we're going to be starting off our first topic of the night, and it is a busy night for us. There's a lot of sort of fat topics that we can actually be talking about here, and the first topic is dealing with the fear of being in it for the long haul. And to me, this is a fear of commitment. This is something that a lot of people have issues with because of various reasons. I think it could be just the fact that they don't want to be locked into things, or you want to be flexible. But there's a specific comment here on Reddit that we can bring up that I think will enlighten us to the specific situation that this person is going to. It's a salacious skeptic. And it is the fear for being in it on the long haul. So submitted 3 hours ago. Let us read from him. Who has experienced finding that sort of love that endures at a young age? Did it scare you? Do you have any advice for taking the plunge and just going for it? What did you do, and was it worth it? I've been happy quite casual. I've been happy being a quite casual person in terms of relations up until now, and really haven't wanted to enter something serious until I'm a bit older, currently 23. But now I am picturing my life with someone special to me. I'm quite cynical though, and the idea of not being with anyone else for the rest of my life seems far fetched to me. So I came to the conclusion a long time ago that I don't really believe in the concept of marriage. Although I simultaneously think this person is the closest to a perfect fit for me, and our lives are very intertwined, so to enter into something serious and then fail in the future has a lot of potential to make things very difficult and painful. I don't believe either of us could ever hurt the other, but you never know what life is going to throw at you. TLDR, I'm too scared of the future to make something happen. Do you have advice? Now, I think this is the argument that a lot of people who don't commit to relationships have in common, and that is fear of the unknown. But Acorn, take it away here. What is your initial sort of feel on this topic?
Well, I think it's interesting. I do think that you are right that a lot of people have that fear that keeps them from being able to see too far into the future with someone that they're interested in, and keeps them in a non-committal kind of situation. But what I think is interesting is that little note came at the end of this person's post. Earlier on, it didn't seem like fear was as much of a motivation. So, I mean, this the poster is thinking of long term relationships, but it didn't seem comfortable with the idea of monogamy or like the institution of marriage as in general. And so I have to kind of wonder why that is. Uh, he says, "I'm quite cynical. The idea with of not being with anyone for the rest of my life seems far fetched." And I came to the conclusion a long time ago that I don't believe in the concept of marriage. So, uh, I mean, fear of commitment is very different than I don't believe in marriage. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, it can overlap, but in this case, I'm thinking that perhaps this poster already kind of has decided that that's not his path, and that regardless of whether or not he gets into a relationship, that maybe he sees, an alternate future, maybe cohabitation without marriage, or maybe a number of short-term relationships rather than being with one person long term. But then they also describe um, the person that he's with as being someone he could see would ever hurt. He wouldn't hurt her, she wouldn't hurt him. Um, so it's that the fear thing doesn't hold up as strongly for me when I'm looking at this. Uh, the poster's 23 years old, which is young by the standards of today. I mean, it's old enough to consider this kind of thing, but at the same time, most people are not getting married that young anymore. And uh, so I'm thinking that this person's doing a lot of thinking, but perhaps hasn't experienced enough of long-term relationships to really know what comes along with it and what kind of real questions you need to be asking yourself, and how that would look going forward.
My topic thing, my main point is he is 23. He's young, and I think a lot of people at this age range are a bit idealistic. You know what I'm saying? It's like they really have their own ideas of what they think they want. They feel like that they may have the entire world at their feet, and the potential is there to do something great, something wonderful, and maybe don't want to sort of buck yourself down and sort of tie yourself down to somebody. This is one of those things that I don't know. I mean, he didn't bring fear into it. So that was actually a good point that you make. He doesn't do it until the very end. And he, quote, describes his current situation as a, quote, perfect fit. I don't know if any situations are ever a perfect fit. You sort of have to work on relationships to make sure that they last as long as they do. But it's one of those things in which, I think he needs to just mature with a little bit of age. This is just one of those things in which I think that as he gets older, then maybe I think his mentality changes. Because I know how I was as 23, and I know how I am now, over the hill and old. And I think,
Tired.
yeah,
He's tired.
it's just tired all the time. I think the serious question that we do have to ask is like, how long do you want to take how long do people consider themselves in a something serious? Is like, how long should you consider a serious relationship actually being? Are you in a serious relationship when you're in a 6 month relationship? Are you in a serious relationship when you're in a year long relationship? I mean, are you constantly going out with other people and giving yourself options, and that is a hindrance to your current daily lives? I'm not exactly sure what it is. Everybody has different reasons with regards to it, but it seems to me you're right. Fear was only brought up at the very end to maybe help justify his rationale, but it might not necessarily be the main reason why he doesn't want to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, and yeah, that whole thing you said about it being a perfect fit. I mean, so either it is not actually a perfect fit, and he, in his young, super loving mind, thinks that it is perfect, and that's great. A lot of people do that, and then sometimes they get a realization later on that maybe it wasn't. Usually hindsight. Um, but he says they're intertwined, and you know, but yet he still doesn't consider that a serious long term relationship. That they have this perfect fit, and like if you were going to look forward into the distance with someone, wouldn't you want that person to be the person you describe as having a perfect fit with?
Hmm.
So, yeah, I'm getting. I mean, I definitely get that he's got some kind of hesitancy to consider a long term thing, but it doesn't. I mean, he doesn't also say that he wants to go out and have flings either. It seems like he's considering this thing in a serious way, and you know, we have to go through risk if we want to have something meaningful, right? There's going to be fears that come along with it. You're going to be afraid that things will be difficult. You'll be afraid of being in pain or maybe hurting someone else. You'll be afraid of uh, having regrets. But all of that is necessary if you want this relationship to actually yield, something that is real and meaningful. So uh, I think right now he's in his own head. I think he's thinking about a future which he does not yet understand. And given time, a lot of these questions will answer themselves, and the fear will dissipate because he'll recognize that, hey, I'm in, hopefully in a healthy relationship that indicates to me that this idea I had before is wrong and that it can be okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, a lot of the times it is fear that comes into a long term relationship. In this particular case, it might not be. But, like, for our people out there, like, what is the standard type of fears that people have when when deciding whether or not they want to commit to someone? I mean, is it sort of like a FOMO thing, your fear of missing out on somebody else that could be, quote, perfect for you? Or is it more of a, like, all of a sudden now I'm going to be in a long term relationship? I can't just go out there and do stuff. I mean, is that one of those things that people really, really sort of fear like when they go into one of these like questions of whether or not they want to commit to somebody?
I would say there's a lot of that. I don't think it's the only thing. I mean, I think people have genuine fears and they're based in reality that, people are afraid of, uh, committing to one person and that person being the wrong person, who, whatever that means, the wrong person. Maybe they cheat, maybe they're not going to make you happy in the long run, maybe they're not actual marriage material, but there's a billion stories we can tell.
Oh yeah.
But it seems to be a trend these days. And I'm still, I mean, personally, I don't think I can get with it. But there seems to be some kind of value in these no strings attached, non-committal relationships where you don't catch feelings, like you don't get involved emotionally with the person. And like I understand casual sex, great, feels good, friction, good stuff. But uh, but that people now are so, I mean, it's it's so common that like almost like wanting something more and real is a turnoff to them. That you know, it can only go so far before you got to switch it up. And I'm wondering, why is there a trend to avoid those kind of things? Like, is it just because it's hard, or what? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think the thing about it is I feel like more and more you look at people in the way that the trends have sort of handed out. The We almost feel like I've almost believed that we live in a quote fearful society. That I've noticed things as I've gotten older that changed that has changed in the way that people are raised. For example, helicopter parenting is very common nowadays because parents are very fearful about how their children are raised up. You and I grew up in an environment where kids were allowed to experiment and go out without the supervision of parents, go out into the woods, you go out. Then, when dinner time comes in, you were expected to come back. A lot of kids don't experience the outdoors and the individuality of being out there, by themselves for a long period of time and then coming back for dinner. They just doesn't happen. I honestly believe that some things like that, as the way that you were raised, like almost being like sheltered, doesn't give you the experience of what fear should be and what conquering it will do for a person, because it is very, very satisfying when you take that leap and it is successful. But it is also very, very big as a person to grow from a failure, to take that leap, have it not work, and then become a better person because of it, because you realized I made a mistake, or this was something I should have not done, or I did it. I'm still proud that I did it, but now I've learned from it and I can become a better person. I think a lot of younger people do not have that ability nowadays, and it sort of translates into relationships. And it is basically created this subculture of people who don't want to commit, only want to have short-term relationships, and aren't able to sort of express themselves properly and know what they want because they're afraid that they're going to be rejected for what they feel like is what they want out of a relationship, and it's not going to be what the other person wants. And that fear drives them to this sort of non-committal plastic relationship is what I would call
Yeah, that's interesting.
it.
Interesting concept. Um, I mean, I'm sure that's a that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I do think that people are also lazy. I think, uh, it's much easier just to like have a no strings, easygoing thing. If it's there for me when I want it, great. If it's not, okay, I don't need it anyways. Move on next. People are very fast food about everything these days.
Hmm.
So I think that's part of it as well. But when we look at these commitment issues, and then this idea of committing to something long term with one person, do you think that men are more prone to these kind of commitment issues than women?
I think it's an assumption that a lot of men are prone to commitment issues. I don't think. I think if you were to research and go into the numbers, that you'll find that men get quote blamed for not committing to the woman that they want or anything like that. But I think a lot of women also have this sort of fear of making sure that they are with the right man or woman, and they might end up hurting themselves in the long run because they are afraid of commitment. I don't have exact numbers, so I'm not going to be able to sort of prove it, but it, I don't think it's something that is related to one gender specific. I think every type of man and woman have commitment issues based on how they were raised and how they grew up. And and I think it really does affect them in the long run. Because of the that sort of unknown that you're going to be going into is something that a lot of people really don't want to risk. So, are men more prone to commitment issues? I would say no, because I know that if I were to find that right person, I would take no hesitation to making sure that as soon as I knew that this was the right thing to do, to just go for it. So, but I think not a lot of people are like me. And I think a lot of people would be it takes seasoning in my world. That's how I would sort of describe it, as to understanding what it is they want first before they're able to sort of go out there and try to go get it. And I think that non understanding, that lack of quote seasoning, is what I think is affecting both men and women. But that's my take on
Yeah,
it. What about you? I mean,
I
like,
could say that.
everybody has a different take on this. So, I mean, like, a lot of people think that it is just, it's men ruining relationships and not being able to commit and making women jaded. That's not how you feel, is it?
So I would like to say that it is an equal thing, but I I don't think that um, true equality can exist or will exist because biologically there are some differences that influence that. Uh, I think that women tend, towards commitment more than men simply because they have more at stake and more at risk. I think that if uh, it behooves a woman to be with their partner long term in case of a pregnancy or something like that. And so then you would not, for a guy, it's easy enough to, hop out if you don't have a kid and, you don't have any responsibility to that person. But a woman, if she's, got a child, the way that society is structured, generally she's expected to take care of it more than the man traditionally. And there's a lot more on her plate in that way. So whether or not someone mentally and emotionally wants to go for something more committed and long term, I think biological influences are there. But I think people also just regardless of being a man or a woman, I think even though they want many of them want to have kind of easygoing flingy type things, I think that naturally people are inclined to be together for something longer. And so generally, look at the friends with benefit situations, those kind of things. Generally, someone ends up not being able to maintain it because they end up wanting something more. They want
Mm-hmm.
something that's longer term. So I just think it's natural for it to move in that direction,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be, but you know,
We
yeah,
can go deep onto this because commitment issues are one of those things that it's a rabbit hole that we could go in. So
sure,
hopefully, yeah, in this particular case, the fear of not being in it. I mean, there are so many issues. There are so many things that could relate to it. Hopefully, we've enlightened uh, this particular person, who his name is Salacious Skeptic, that depending on the situation that you're in, and the type of issues that you want to deal with. I think my take on it is that we that it maybe your view changes in a couple of years, and your take on it seems to be like it's very similar to what I sort of believe. I think,
Yep.
right? Yep. So, all right. So let's go on to our next topic here, where we sort of focus on something completely different. And it's not about commitment. This was a question of a couple that was already in a relationship. So uh, the topic is I have to comfort my boyfriend after he makes me mad, which is a little weird. So I would think that you would know that if you were the one that was getting mad, that you would be the one that'd be needing comforting, but not in this particular case. So, Tim, why don't you take this away and see what not my Netflix thinks about this particular situation?
Yeah, sure. So we have looks like a lady here,
Hmm.
26 years old, female, as her describing her relationship with her 27-year-old boyfriend. And the title is I, 26-year-old female, have to comfort my boyfriend after he makes me mad. The capital letters should tell you everything about how she feels about that.
Hmm.
So she says, my boyfriend and I don't really fight. And when we do, we just argue or have deeper discussions. These arguments always occur because one of us has done something that the other that has hurt the other person in some way, but never intentionally. We talk about the event, how we felt about it, and how to move forward. It's been a huge step up from ignoring the problem and just acting passive aggressive towards each other until we get over it, like we have done for years before. I love being able to openly communicate with him and that he is able to do the same for me. But there is a catch. Every time he does something to me and I express my feelings why I'm hurt, he kind of turns it around and makes it about himself. Suddenly it becomes less about how I am hurt and more about how he feels like a terrible boyfriend, how I deserve better, how he never learns, that kind of thing. I always acknowledge he's improved so much, but he really has it in his head. I feel like I always have to immediately get over how I'm feeling to take care of him. And honestly, it makes me feel a little resentful. I feel like I don't get my time to be taken care of. The main point of the discussion is thrown out because he needs to be reassured. I don't think he's trying to manipulate me or the situation, at least purposely. He does make sure to apologize and thinks of ways to improve moving forward, so it does feel resolved. But maybe I want more of the affection afterwards. Some more information? We have broken up before due to him not being the best communicator and just immediately shutting down. So that's why it's so great to hear him being more open about his feelings. Maybe the past breakup is the reason why he's so insecure every time we argue. Too long didn't read. My boyfriend makes me mad. I say why. He gets sad and it made me mad. All attention goes to him. All right. So
Where do we start
there's
with
a
this?
this is a this is it. Just dump it in our lap here and we'll run with it.
Well,
So
yeah.
did you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, let me see if I can sort of understand what's going on here. They get into a fight, and I'm trying to do this in layman's terms to just sort of make it easy for that my understanding. And tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm interpreting this incorrectly. They get into a fight. Like she thinks that they should fight a particular way. He gets down on himself. All of a sudden, the fight doesn't matter. Then it's all about oh, I'm such a terrible person. It's like, and it's basically her having to stroke his ego or his beliefs into not saying that he's a terrible person, and she gets no sympathy for whatever they were arguing with beforehand. Am I understanding that right?
You got it.
Yeah,
Yep.
to me, she says it. I don't think he's being manipulative, but that's if it is his go-to. If you don't have a straight up fight where you are just arguing over a point and that's all you argue about, then it is manipulation. I'm sorry, it is because it's his it's his get out of jail card. And if this is happening more and more, it might not necessarily be him. To me, this is how I feel. Like, I don't know any of the background of all of their relationship, but this is my opinion of it. It's his go-to because he can get away with it. Guys are tricky that way. And to me, it's like, oh, I understand. And what she was actually looking for is what he's actually doing, saying that he's going to try to improve himself and try to better himself as a boyfriend. It makes her very happy. He knows that, but he's in an argument. He maybe doesn't want to argue anymore, or the argument itself is petty and you keep going on about it. He just falls into this, like, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, I don't know how to express myself properly, I'm so terrible at this, I didn't mean to make you angry, blah blah blah, and whatever the way that you can do it, and it makes you capitulate to it. And to me, it is emotional manipulation, because it seems like he's able to get away with it, but now you're resentful of him because you feel like you're not getting equal time with regards to being coddled. At that particular point, you also have to express to him that, yeah, you may be, a terrible boyfriend, but I hate it that I have to reinforce this. I've told you multiple times that you are wonderful and you do not have to apologize for being a terrible boyfriend. But at the same time, I don't need to be telling you this all the time. This is something that if you are an actually growing man and feel like that this is what you need to do to get better, then get better with it. Sometimes I don't know. It just means like, but sometimes I think like if you're in a situation like that as the female in that relationship, you do have to tell your man to suck it up and deal with it, because if he's going to keep using that as an excuse, then how much is he actually growing? That's my 2 cents. How about you?
Yeah, I would. I would say that it's not just a guy thing. I
Hmm.
mean,
Oh no,
I've
yeah.
heard, I've seen, I've
Hmm.
personally experienced the other side of this equation, and so while it may be, this way for them, it could very easily in someone else's relationship uh, go the other way. Uh,
Yeah.
I think that uh, there are people who make things about themselves. They will redirect conversations to be about themselves. They will become uncomfortable if they are not being talked about after a certain amount of time. You know these kinds of people.
Hmm.
But in this case, I don't think he's doing it for attention, like for the sake of attention. I think he's doing it because it is a technique and it does work. I think that if it is not consciously done, it is subconsciously done over and over again because it works. It basically what's happening is uh, the person who does this kind of thing is taking advantage of someone's kind heart or like their caring nature during their argument, and it is
Right?
actually it's a form of emotional manipulation,
Yeah, that's what I
right?
thought too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you end up moving away from the issue itself, right? You start to make it about you instead of the issue, and it's no longer about who's to blame and accepting that blame. It's no longer about finding the solution. It's more about finding the solution and pampering and providing solace to this person because now they've gone to attacking themselves. They're saying, "I'm a terrible boyfriend. I never learn. I just think you deserve better." Those kind of things. I think it's a total cop out. I think it's BS, and I think that again, it's like a manipulative technique to get the person to basically stop you from hitting yourself, like stop you from damaging yourself further. They feel bad, they obviously care about you, and so they don't want you to hurt yourself more. So there's some amount of pity that comes with it, and they end up trying to take care of you rather than getting to the meat of the issue and to the solution, right? And she says that they do end up resolving things in time, and that she wants to have her moment and feel like that affectionate response from him. But Uh, I think it's probably more than that because you know, I think that constantly being knocked out of like your rationale and your when you're having an argument with someone, you want to get to the point,
Hmm.
right? And if they take that away from you by starting to play the victim and turning the argument into, hey, but I'm the bad guy and I hate myself for it, they can start crying, and suddenly you're just dragged into a whole different thing that has nothing to do with the original argument.
Yeah.
So I think it's wrong, and when I've seen it in the past, I've called it out in my relationships. It doesn't usually go that well, but sometimes you got to keep it real.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think she is in a situation now where she has to keep it real, and we look at what she's posted, and she says that they've actually gone deeper into their relationship. So the arguing here is actually the next step. They used to be resentful and not actually talk about it. So they were passive aggressive. So I guess it's a little bit of a step up, but I've never heard of emotional manipulation being a step up to anything, honestly, because I think in this particular case, the male component of this is um, not necessarily a very averse at arguing, so doesn't know how to argue, and has found this way to actually sort of quote win arguments. And couples the way that they are, sometimes they have to be the quote winner of the argument. And I think a little bit of that is what is causing this resentment from Not My Netflix, because by having to sort of coddle him and reinforce his beliefs in this particular way and doing it over and over and over again, it does become about him. But I wanted to actually ask you more. I used to have the argument that I used to have with my girlfriend in college was that actually arguments were actually a good thing, and she would give me this look like I what the hell are you talking about? I thought, and this is me being naive as a younger man, was that it is actually somewhat healthy to actually go out there and actually fight for something that you believe in a relationship. If you feel like something is very important for you, you strenuously say what it is important. It really gets out the honesty in a relationship. So like my question to you is that is fighting like a reasonable way of communicating between two people, and is there a proper way to fight, honestly?
Well, it depends how they do it,
Yeah.
and it depends how you define fighting. Like having a debate with someone doesn't have to be a fight, and you can get out your your deep felt emotions, and you can get out your principles and your theories about living and this and that. You can get all that stuff out without fighting. If you're fighting about something, it means you've come to a head and you are disagreeing strongly with each other, and that it's come to a point where you cannot be as civil about the whole thing. I think there is such thing as healthy fighting. I think that most people don't do that, and that there have to be rules about how you fight, so that you're taking care of the other person. You never make it personal. You never, uh, you never drag them down
Mm-hmm.
beyond and beat them up this outside of this point. Just you make your point, they make theirs, and you try to work it out. But I don't think that having fights means you're in a healthy relationship. I don't think uh, that I think disagreeing with someone is one thing, but if you are constantly finding yourself fighting with someone, it's usually an indication that things are not going well, and that there are things that are not being resolved, especially if it's a repeat topic. You're fighting with the same thing over
Mm-hmm.
and over again. It just means that there's something going on. Some people actually associate the feelings that come with fighting as passion. All right, and they think, "Oh, I'm such a passionate relationship. He's such a passionate guy. She's such a passionate girl." When in fact, they're just you know, dramatic, loud, aggressive,
So you've
whatever.
met my
You know,
Italian friends.
I think that people just need to try to like step back from it a little bit and figure out what they're fighting for, what the goal is. Like when you come out of it, is it eh, do you have to be right about this, or is it just that you need to be heard? Like think about the reason why you have your fight, and then you can decide whether or not that's a healthy thing or not. And knowing when to stop something before it turns into a fight is also a huge skill to have.
Well, and that's the thing, right? That takes experience. Like if you know something's coming to a head, I think as a person who's experienced in knowing is like I don't need to have a fight here, will be able to sort of pacify the situation properly and not let it get to the point where it is going to result in a full blown, knockdown drag out fight. But it's one of those things. Healthy debate is great. Strenuous debate is great, but you know, you're right about the drama thing. Sometimes people feel like that they need that extra umph in the relationship to sort of push it along or give themselves something to talk about. And in this particular case, it's like fighting is that's sort of unhealthy, and it's just not necessary. But back to our to our poster, in this particular case, at least they've gotten to the point where they are fighting with each other. But I think they are what they are doing is very, very unhealthy because they don't know how to fight to each other. It's definitely better than the just sort of silent resentment that they had before. But what can they do to sort of get past the next stage? And I don't think this they can get to the next phase of their relationship without her calling him out on his BS about being a better person. I mean, like,
Right.
what else can you assume that? What else can you do to basically get them to sort of not end a fight in that particular way?
I think she needs to be explicit and
Hmm.
to not let it happen in their fights. She needs to be like, listen to me, what you're doing right now is not it's not okay because it is forcing us to not talk about the issue at hand, and instead for us to think about your feeling. And like this is harsh. This is kind of a harsh thing to say to someone, especially when feelings are already elevated.
Hmm.
But this guy needs to learn that this can't be his way out of being in trouble and be his way out of losing an argument or something. Like he needs to stick to the topic and get through it, and afterwards they can take care of each other and how they feel, and like those leftover kind of like the sad emotions, they can come together and make up all that good stuff. But he can't get in the way of the process of their arguing.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if couples understand what focused fighting is, where you just sort of like fight on that topic, because I think a lot of couples stray away from it so quickly based on what the tone of the argument is, how is being taken, the direction of the argument that people are taking, and like does it get personal? Because a lot of people don't have anything to fall back on, especially if they know they're in the wrong, so they go and try to sort of go a different way, and that never really works out with people. And like, knowing when to let it go is very, very difficult, especially if you have the type of personality that feels like you were right and you need to be right, or you need to win, and winning is very, very important to you. And I think, you know without experience, without being in a relationship and understanding that those two things are very unnecessary in a relationship, because it's about give and take. It's not about being right all the time, and it's not about winning. It's about being able to live in a very peaceful, harmonious manner with the person you're in a relationship with. Because I think if you feel like that those two are more important than taking into account that the feelings of your significant other, then you have a bigger problem. That's
Yeah.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think there's something I like to call conscious attenuation, and that's uh, basically what it is like you are consciously making sure that things don't escalate beyond a certain point, to a point that it gets ugly. We talked about those like personal attacks, how those are never okay in a
Hmm.
fight. But in this, it could be your tone, it could be your rising tone, it could be, uh, you're making wild arm gestures because you're just so fed up. Right? Those things are all points of escalation, and if you can consciously kind of keep them in line, you could find that you are able to keep more of an even level in the relationship. And so instead of then going off on a sidetrack or losing the point of the argument, you're still working towards that solution that is fair to both people and gets you a result that maybe means that you won't fight about this again, or at least you feel better in the day. But, you know, these things can only happen if you stay on target. And if your partner, like this guy from our Reddit post here, is constantly just dragging the relationship towards his own, you know, I don't know, self-esteem issues as a way of getting out of trouble, then that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
But good luck to these guys. I hope that she can find a way to communicate to him her needs and how their way of fighting is actually not solving any of their real problems, and you know, kind of break that cycle.
Yeah, and I think as soon as she understands that what they're doing is not fighting, it's more emotional manipulation, then I think she might get over that real quick, even though she's in full denial of it because she basically posted it online saying, "I don't think it's emotional manipulation." It absolutely is emotional
Right,
manipulation.
but I mean,
So,
there are people that post on Reddit that are like, "Oh, I'm in the perfect relationship, but he
yeah,
shot my dog,"
yeah.
or something
Well,
like
you
that.
know what they
It's
say
like, well,
when somebody says the word "but," usually everything before it really doesn't matter.
right, exactly. Hey,
So,
so let's go ahead and jump forward onto our third topic here, and that's coming from the Dating Over 30 Reddit, and the user is Honeycomb8656, and this is an interesting one. I thought this was interesting because it's like a throwback. Like when I read this one, I felt like I was looking at a magazine that would have come out in the 1950s. Like
really,
it doesn't have to be anti-feminist, but it really could be, depending on how you read it. So the question is, how do you make a man feel needed, right?
hmm,
And I'm just going to go ahead with it.
okay.
The person posted, I was reading a book by a dating coach, and he said that men want to feel needed, appreciated, admired, and accepted. He said on a date, you should make a man feel interesting, needed, and important. How do you do that? He didn't provide any specific examples. Any feedback would be great. Also, what type of compliments do you give a guy on the first date? Thank you. So this this lady here is looking for a way to kind of I don't know, sugar up, softly manipulate the guy into thinking that she needs him so that she'll get some kind of benefit out of the situation. Maybe they'll end up in a relationship. I don't really know what her angle is, but uh, it is it is a little bit tricky. What's your first take before we really get into this?
Well, I think it's very old school. This is not something that a lot of people really ask about nowadays. When you go into a date, and this is sort of my sort of take on this whole thing, is like when two people meet, the first thing I think of is I would like to get to know the person a little bit more, not necessarily like thinking that, ooh, she's complimenting me on my shoes. She's a very nice person. To me, that doesn't say anything. I want to. I personally, this is me though, so a lot of people can be different, but I would rather have her talk for a good majority of the time because I'm more interested in understanding where she comes through as a person if I'm actually interested in her, as opposed to having to quote feel needed. I think it's interesting that like the dating coach said that all that men all want to feel needed. I like when I'm already in a relationship with a person to provide things for them, cooking for them, buying gifts, stuff like that. That's great. But I don't think I think that type of advice is better for a woman who is already in a relationship. I'm just thinking, I don't know. I just think it's so old school that it just doesn't really even apply to me. So, I mean, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm a bit at a loss at this because honestly, whoops, because I just, the whole, you know, old complimenting and women saying, "Oh golly gee, you look so good in your suit," and you have such an important job. It's like, yeah, it's a nice ego boost and all, but for my partner, I would love for her to be more open about it. It's like, yeah, and your job's awesome, it's great, whatever. But I think Z's a nicer guy. He provides for the family. That's fantastic, and it's not necessarily compliments, but you know,
I
it's a little
just think
different.
it's about. I think this whole thing is about setting up a power dynamic, right? And
Hmm.
in the traditional relationship, men have held the power and have been not just the breadwinners, but like the people, the person in the relationship that goes and gets stuff done, gets the
Hmm.
builds, I don't know, rebuilds the fence or fixes the car, climbs up on the roof. Those kind of like here's a problem, here's a solution. So in years and years ago, if a woman was seen as a kind of a damsel in distress and maybe, oh, I can't possibly lift this heavy thing, can you pick it up for me, Mr. Big Strong Man? Like that kind of dynamic really worked, and it fed into the male ego, which was, the way to bag a man back then, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I can share a little story here. I gave some advice to a friend of mine. Uh, uh, she had, I think, an appliance broken in her home, and a man offered to come over and fix it, and she was actually feeling really bad about it. She felt like, oh, I feel bad that this guy has to come over and do this. I don't want to, I don't want to have to, you know, I don't want to have to owe something or feel uncomfortable that I'm just taking advantage, something like that. And I said, look, listen, just let him do it. Okay. If a guy offers something like this, it's not just because maybe he wants to help you out, but also like some guys just they have that traditionally male personality. They crave that, like, give me a problem so I can fix it. Give me something to, you know, bang my head against. And I didn't tell her so she could manipulate him, but I told her, like, basically, don't feel bad about this. It actually is a good thing for, people to have something to work on, and when they fix it, when it's all done, they feel good about themselves. So just, let it be.
The
And
modern,
go ahead.
I wanted to say the modern equivalent to that is the guy coming over to fix your computer, which is the sort of I think if you're watching this on Twitch, I think a lot of our audience at this point are very technologically savvy. So there is that sort of assumption that most guys, even some women who are very literate technology wise, come over. Oh, I'm having issues with my computer. Can you, can you help me fix this issue? And guys sort of jump at it. It's like, yeah, I know how to fix that. I'm a computer person or I'm a programmer, and it's like, oh, I know how to do that. So same thing, different age group.
It
It's like,
happened all through, in our
mhm,
college too. We had a
yeah,
couple guys in the hall, and the girls from the next floor up would come down and say, "Hey, I have a computer problem." The guys would go fix it. They feel good. They feel like,
hmm
"Hey, maybe this means something," and the girls would be like, "Nope, doesn't mean something.
doesn't
Bye."
mean anything at all. Yeah. Well,
See ya.
we're just gonna call him Big Pants. Then Big Pants loved visiting the females in the dorms and in the apartments above us when we moved to apartments, remember? And he would get obsessed over these women, but that was his way of hitting on them essentially, putting himself in a situation so maybe that he could show himself that he was a useful guy. Did
Yeah.
it go
Well,
anywhere? No.
no, he definitely was useful in
Yeah.
that he got used. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember those. I
Yeah.
remember some scandalous stories there. That sucked.
Oh yeah, it was
But
terrible.
so, anyways, I want to put this out here though. But like, for any man or woman, uh, this kind of mentality, this traditional mentality, kind of it maintains itself on this false premise that a person is not capable or would be bumbling if they tried to solve this problem on their own, and that somehow creating a need for someone else to fill uh, is because you yourself can't do this. And so, and what I don't like about this whole thing is that it does create a purposeful manipulation, right? Everyone wants to be needed. Everyone wants to be appreciated, admired, accepted, not just men and women. But if you have to make someone feel interesting and needed and important on a date, it's not it's not genuine. Like, it can be. You can also do that and feel that. But if you're purposefully doing it just to game the other person, and like to trick them into developing feelings for you, it it is not it's not real. And if they figure that out, it won't serve you. It'll actually hurt you in the end.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think the bottom line for all of this is not it's not how do we make this person feel needed. It's how can we make our data partner feel valued, right?
Yeah.
and
hmm
and that is much more genuine, and that is something that everyone should be doing, not just on dates, but in every kind of communication, every friendship, every connection you make. You want to make the person that you're interacting with feel like, they're that you want them there to be talking to you.
Yeah, and I think, being valued is the proper word. Like you want to be substantial. Like you being valued is more than being needed. Because you need a pen to write on a piece of paper. You need a knife to cut, vegetables and stuff like that. But when you value somebody, you don't want them just for a need. You want them for more than that, for more than what they provide, for who they are. And I think that's right. And I completely agree with that. But it goes. But how do you go about that? I mean, like, how do you understand? Like, are there things that you can say that would give your significant other, man or woman, like the idea that you value them over just quote needing them, like to a guy,
Yeah.
like what are the things that you can say to a guy that makes you think like, oh, he's so valued versus like, oh, you're so needed. It's like,
Well, the person that posted this also asked, like, what kind of compliments do you give on a first date? And I think giving compliments is a way to show that you value a person. It can be used as a technique to, manipulate them. But if it's not false flattery, if it's genuine, then it is a way of showing value. I think that giving them substance over superficial compliments are really important. So, like, you kind of first you have to feel out that person and find out what they value about themselves. Because if this person has spent so much time working on their education and career, and you come in and you're like, oh, you have really great fashion, like that's going to fall flat. That doesn't It's not going to mean anything to them. So
mm-hmm,
part of that value is, what do they value about themselves? So you can tease that out through conversation, and see what they feel proud about. And also, is this something that they've worked on, or were they born with it? Right? If you tell someone they have beautiful eyes, they didn't really do anything to get those beautiful eyes, so they might not value it. I mean, maybe people just like to be called pretty or handsome. It,
mm-hmm.
it feels good, but it's not as much of an in-depth value of the person. If you said something that was more like, I don't know, deep, that it shows that, I think it's incredible that you managed to accomplish your goals in such a short time. Your PhD. I mean, that's a real accomplishment. Like, those kind of things, I think they weigh heavier.
Yeah, and like the thing about it is, it's like my, I guess, equivalent to that would be when you're complimenting a woman, for example. You can say, "Oh, that dress is really pretty." It's a very superficial comment because it's commenting on the dress. But if you were to say to her the same comment but in a different way, I, you look incredible in that dress. I just love your sense of style. Where do you come up with these ideas of matching the things together? Then you've basically commented on not just the dress, but as her sort of fashion sense. And if she values that more, then you have gotten yourself a good in. That I think what you're trying to say. It's like you're not basically just commenting like, oh, his shoes or his hair or something very very simple that you can always comment on. If somebody buys a stylish pair of shoes, they're great looking on you. But if you comment on the fact that that particular person has a tendency to always pick nice clothes or has a tendency to look very different and flashy, and it's something that you appreciate, then you're actually appreciating the sense of style, which is a little bit more than what the person is actually picking out. I mean, am I saying that correctly? I think.
No, you're right. That's baller, man. You
Yeah.
you come up with some good stuff there. That will definitely land well, I feel. Um, the I think that the compliments should also be kind of dependent on at what part of the date you're on.
Mm,
So, like, compliment at the moment of meeting someone, you might say something that's a little more superficial, or kind of like easy, and kind of make people relax and break the ice, kind of thing. During the the course of the date, you might give a compliment based on what you've learned about the person, and something that surprised you, or something that you found really interesting about them. And then by the end of the date, or even when you're texting later on in the evening or next day or whatever, then you can kind of like let it all digest and come up with an overall compliment that will indicate, like, not only did I listen to you, but I saw you, and I think that's, who you are is great. So, um, these kind of things I think are much more valuable than just trying to create a false sense of need. Like,
mm-hmm.
what are you gonna do? You're gonna sit across from them and be like, I can't cut my steak. Can you cut it up for me? It's like, it's like,
You want me to chew that for you
that-
too and
right?
feed it baby bird style?
You know, I don't know. I think that whole need thing, you're playing a dangerous game, because some people get really turned off by a person who's not able to handle their own business, especially, oh man, this whole concept of like adulting just offends me.
You
Like
think so? But
it's
because
so annoying
I
because
think
people are in their 30s and their 40s and they're like, "Oh man, I was adulting." I'm like, "No, dude, you're an adult. Shut up. You're just an adult and you're barely an adult. So get over your shit." Honestly, I just, if it's a 20 something, 20-year-old and they're saying, "Oh, I'm adulting. I paid my, I don't know, taxes the first time." That's like, okay, golf clap, move
yeah.
on. But past a certain point, if you say that, it's kind of embarrassing for you.
Yeah, because it's assumed that you should understand that that's what your life should be now. It's like if this is the first time you're understanding what that means, then you're SOL, man. Good luck. Good luck where
Right.
you are.
And not to go on too much of a tangent, but I just mean being needy is not always a good thing, and generally not often a good thing, right? Wanting someone is better than needing them.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, and just overall, before we go on to the last topic here, I don't think people should try to abuse psychology to succeed in the dating game, right? The pickup artist mentality, that whole like thing is shady to me, and a lot of these dating coaches and books actually suggest these kind of techniques to make people sort of uh, it sort of pushes them into feeling things that maybe they're not actually feeling. I think you should be straight up, be you, uh, appreciate people, let them know that, and the rest, if it's natural and if it's right, then it'll go forward. If it's not, then it shouldn't go forward, and you should get out of there.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
No, and I'm in complete agreement with that last part because I think it's a cheap trick. And this is my final say on this whole thing, too. I think it's a cheap trick to use psychological techniques to manipulate somebody into going the direction that you want them to. Because what ends up happening is that you're going to have to consistently manipulate that person in order to get the results that you want, and that might not be what you actually want to, one, do, or two, if this person ends up having the type of ability to sort of break free of the manipulation where you left with. So to me, it's like honesty the best policy. Show them who you really are, and if they like you for who you really are, you're one step further than a lot of people, honestly. So,
True.
yep. All right, we're getting to the last one, and the last one's going to be a fun topic here. So, the last one is actually a very. This was a short post by the person that actually it was not necessarily a short post. It was a listing post of something that I think everybody goes through, and there are red flags. Now, I want to preface this before we get into it. Red flags are based on personal experience. So, and this is my feeling on red flags. Now, there are, quote, general red flags, which a lot of people say are just big, giant no nos that you should do or you should be aware of. But then there are personal red flags. And personal red flags are based on the experience that you've had in the dating world that usually lead yourself down a path that will end up becoming bad for you in the long run. So, but let's take a look at Chicken on a Tree. Interesting name here, as she has listed 18 of her own personal red flags here, and we're going to try to read them all. So she is a 27 female. I've been dating most of my 20s minus a 10-month period where I was committed in a relationship. So apparently that did not end well. Based on my dating experiences, I've put a list of quote red flags to try to protect myself from falling for the wrong type of guy, which has happened more than once. Is this list justifiable, or am I being too paranoid and negative, and this could stop me from meeting someone great? And the list goes on as to number one, fear seeing people.
Oh, wait, wait, wait.
Wait.
See, before you get in there,
Yeah, yeah,
I was, before we even jump on this, I just want to say that, like, um, I know she's worried about being paranoid and negative and that kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing, and about whether making this list is justifiable. I think it's fine, and I think that like it's awesome that you took the time to put this together and share it out there with other people in Reddit. Um, because a lot of people get caught up in these things. They relive these mistakes and they make mistakes they don't necessarily have to make if they could see if they knew about these red flags beforehand. So getting feedback on whether or not all of your red flags should be red flags, I mean, that's okay. I guess we might see something there that she might reconsider, but I think it's great. So I just want to put that out there first.
No, the thing about it is like, if these are warning signs for everybody. Like, personally, these are her particular warning signs, and to myself and to you, there could be different warning signs based on what you've experienced out there in the world. I mean, like, for one, she says fears people seeing you together in public, doesn't believe in public affection, doesn't ask what contraception you are on or if you are on contraception, is busy all of a sudden, doesn't message you in between dates, doesn't talk about what the relationship is after a while, is too forceful about hanging out, talks about X more than twice out of context and negatively, makes his family seem super important and disregards yours. You wouldn't like my friends, is vague about what he wants, compliments you by bringing down women, e.g., you're not drama like other girls, no change in behavior after acknowledgement of what relationship is, aka putting in no effort. Not interested in meeting friends. Does not introduce you when runs into people while you're there. Does not introduce you to their housemates. Complains about wearing a condom. Doesn't ask you questions about yourself. I mean, some of these are interesting. Some of these are very on point and are very specific, and I would probably agree with some of these, but not all of them are, in my mind, red flags. I mean, the one particular one that immediately when I was reading this was, um, doesn't believe in public affection. Not a lot of people like PDA. Some people like PDA, some people don't. Some people like to be controlled, like controlled PDA, where they're alone. Some people uh, would like, you are happy kissing somebody else in the park and letting the world see it. It's fine, but everybody has their own about stuff like that. Four is busy all of a sudden. This person could be highly successful, and busyness could be something that is just a part of who they are, and that's not something that you can control. And you could point out negatives and positives to everything, but these are her personal experiences in these particular situations, and she feels like that they're very important for her to keep a lookout for when it comes to dating. And I'm in agreement with Tim. I think it's good to have them, but but some of them that you've experienced might not necessarily apply to other people, which sort of leads me to a conversation with you, because when you're judging red flags or when you're trying to determine what a personal red flag is, like what what are like some of the quote motivations that lead you to determining that one type of particular behavior is a big negative that you need to be aware of, or if there is something that we notice that is sort of that runs through a lot of the relationships that you feel like is a bad thing. Like what leads you to that decision? Because I know what my personal red flags are, and I think you have personal red flags of your own. But let's go down that rabbit hole of how you sort of determine what is a red flag and what isn't.
I mean, that's it's like you said, it's personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's and oftentimes it's based on the failures you've experienced along the way in your relationships. So, the first one she said, fears people seeing you together. She dated a guy that did not want to make their relationship public. And that is an indication that either they're ashamed of you or I don't know. I don't know what else it could be. It seems like that the person doesn't think that you are of high value
Mm.
because they wouldn't want to be seen next to you. And so, going forward, like for some people, that's not a red flag because they don't even know about it. No one's ever treated them that way. Maybe
Yeah.
they no one ever would. So that wouldn't have to be their red flag. But for her, this has happened to her, so I understand it. And some of these things would never apply to me. Number three, doesn't ask what contraception you are on or if you're on contraception. What? No one's ever going to ask me that because we're just not there yet pharmaceutically. Um, but it's clear that this is not just an issue, but it's important to her, right? If the
Hmm.
guy didn't ask what kind of contraception she's on, it means that he doesn't care about uh, being safe as far as having safe sex and that doesn't lead to an unwanted pregnancy. And that's a very important thing.
Hmm.
But that's a red flag only women would really experience. I mean, not only, but generally, uh, someone you have sex with, you want to make sure that they care about the result of that sex.
Yeah.
Whether or not if there's any danger. If they're just coming in and just basically just you know trying to get in there without any protection, that's that's dangerous in a number of ways.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so you can see that's a valuable red flag. So I mean, yeah, I mean, looking down this list, there's so many of them that probably I would have never considered for myself. But uh, anyone can learn something from all these.
Oh,
You might say, hey, this isn't something I experienced, but like I could see how this would be a problem. So if it does happen, I'll recognize, hey, that's a problem.
yeah. Like, I don't know. The funniest one I think on here is you wouldn't like my friends. That could be, an indication of multiple things. It's not necessarily a red flag. He might understand that he has douchey friends, for one thing. It's like sometimes you're friends with people for so long that you are used to their quote terrible behavior, but other people aren't. And I don't know if they're necessarily ashamed of their own friends, but it could be one of those things where you have had a friend for a long, long time and you just can't get rid of him, or you're unwilling to get rid of him, but you know deep down he's a nice guy, but he acts like a douche. And I just don't think it's a more of a red flag. It's more like I'm just used to him being douchey. So
What do you think about number 8 that talks about his ex more than twice out of context and negatively? That one's weird to me.
that one is weird, but sometimes people don't have a point of reference when it comes to relationships. Now, I don't necessarily think it's a red flag sometimes, but it also could be that he's trying to sort of explain himself, or she's trying to explain herself, but she hasn't dated a lot of people. So I don't know if lack of experience, because a lot of the times you only reference what you know, and if you only know what your ex was like with regards to a particular situation, that's what you're going to reference. Is it a red
Right,
flag? I don't know.
but there's something about it being out of context and negatively. Like, would you want me to reference my ex positively? Like, oh yeah, this is great, but my ex, oh man, she was great. Like, that's not doing good for you. And then like out of context. So, I mean, I can understand that if you guys are just like, I don't know, watching TV and they start talking about sex with their ex. Okay, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But more than twice, like once is okay, twice is a problem, three times
Why
is
is
a big problem. Like
yeah.
I don't know. It just this number 8 sort of threw me. I was like, that's very specific. So she's thinking about something that specifically happened to her with one guy that really pissed her off.
Yeah, yeah, I maybe, and maybe like she is a little, I don't know, self-conscious about uh, being talked about in a negative manner from an ex-boyfriend. I don't know. I mean, like, I would think that, like, oh, it's like, oh, I get, so I'm dating you right now. All of a sudden it's like, oh yes, we're gonna go eat at Baja Fresh. Karen never liked eating at Baja Fresh. She hated this place, but I love this restaurant. And it's like, how is
Yeah,
that
that's
really
crazy.
is that such a bad thing? It's like you're just expressing your love of Baja Fresh at that point. I was like, is that any negative way? I was like, I don't know.
I
But
think it's great that you somehow found a way to bring up Baja Fresh in this in
I,
this cast.
hey, you know what? The thing about it is this personal anecdote here. When you're dating people, there are lots of things that happen, and one of those things is a tendency to not being able to eat at places where your partner just does not enjoy. It is
Oh
it,
yeah,
it just it's a negative part of a relationship that a lot of people don't ever explain, that like, oh, I love this particular restaurant, she doesn't really like it. Well, you can't go and make her feel bad, because she's not going to want to eat anything on the menu that she's not going to want to eat. So you want to sort of compromise on a place that you both like. But what the side effect of that is that you don't ever get to go there unless you're with other
true.
people. And it feels so bad sometimes.
Yes, yes. I definitely feel you on this one. I
Because,
wouldn't call it a red flag because
yeah.
it's going to happen to everyone, but
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and the thing about it is both of us have red flags also. So we've prepared a bit of a screen here, and we're gonna go back and forth between for our red flags. So it's one of those things in which, like, everybody's different. So I think there's a little bit of justification that has to go around here for some of the red flags that we put up. So my first one is more associated to when you are in a relationship already, when there is sudden changes in the way that your significant other answers your questions or describes what is going on. So personal experience has told me that uh, if if this person used to be able to be very descriptive and say like, oh, this is what we did, blah blah blah, then all of a sudden answers are very curt, very short, not really wanting to go into uh, things that you're talking about. Something's going on. At least in my mind, I think there's something going on. There could be something not going on. It could be that I'm misreading the situation and she's just not feeling it. Or it could be that she is just not into you as much talking about these things. So it's just one of those things in which I'm more about behavioral changes. So like when I see changes in behavior, something similar to that always quote perks my interest when it comes to a red flag. So that's a number that's a red flag for myself.
Okay. My first one is that they don't have any friends. And this is not to down anyone who doesn't have friends or who lost their friends or, basically, if you don't have friends, it's not necessarily a problem. But for me, it has been a red flag because for me, what it has meant in my previous relationships was when a person didn't come into the relationship with friends, that all of that was put on my plate, that I was their
Outlet.
entertainment,
Hmm.
that I was the person that they relied on for everything as far as uh, socialization, going out and seeing movies, going to concerts, whatever else. Like the things that they could have split up between different people, it all just became my deal.
Hmm.
So, and also, there is something to me that I appreciate about a partner when they can connect to other people, when they have solid friendships, meaningful connections to others, because I think it's healthy, and I think it's a good skill for everyone to have. So yeah, that one shows up to me.
Yeah. And then my number two is won't have a discussion with you about issues or displays a lack of interest in communicating. Blowing stuff off when I think it's important or if it's something that I feel that we would need to talk about as a red flag to me. It's it's showing a lack of interest. It's showing that you do not want to be involved. And it's one of those things you sort of have to make a self judgment. If she won't have a discussion with you about the anime that you like, that's not a red flag. But if she won't have a discussion with you about moving in together and tries to keep blowing it off or not showing any interest in communicating like what she feels about the suggestion that I've made, big red flag. Because one, she might not be able to communicate it, which is something that you would be able to work through, or two, just actually does not want to consider your suggestion and could be one of those things that she has no idea how to express how she's not interested in doing what it is that you're doing or wanting to do what it is that you feel like is the next step, and that could be very problematic. And I've personally had a relationship end because we just didn't we at the end being resentful about it just didn't want to communicate, and it ended and I felt sad about it because I think it could have been fixed if we actually had talked about some of our situations that we were having out and not led to the resentment and all this other stuff. So that's my number two.
My number two is that it is uphill from the start. I know some people that are looking for challenge. They're looking to hunt and catch their prey. They want someone who doesn't want them. They want someone who is unobtainable. They want someone who's with someone else But if they can just get them, it means that they're somehow better. Like that's just that's just a few examples of a kind of uphill. But basically, the beginning of the relationship should be the easiest that it's ever going to be, in that it should be it should be naturally flowing forward. It should not be you convincing the person to like you. It should not be you pulling teeth to get them to agree to a date, or it should not be that uh, you know this would be such a great relationship if it weren't for this. Uh, basically, if you see all of these things in the way, perhaps you are not meant for this, or this is not meant for you, and you can consider maybe taking a step back, and maybe even uh, going on, uh, going being upfront with the person, saying, "Hey, I see these issues, and if we can't figure out a way to resolve them, then I don't see this going forward." Because it's just, most of those situations where they start off that hard, it either stays hard, it gets harder, or it falls apart.
Yeah, yeah, and it doesn't get easier, right? So like the longer it gets, it's going to get harder. So good point about that. My third one is constantly insulting your friends or family for their habits. Now, this is a personal one because I dated a person who didn't find the best behavior of my friends and family. Like, I would say, like, I would hate certain things, but it instantly gave her the okay to start insulting members of my family and some of my friends over what they're doing. It's like, that's not okay to me unless I've specifically pointed out that that behavior is probably not desirable. I mean, to me, it just basically showed that, quote, she had better friends and her family was better, which is never the case. Nobody's friends are better or family is better than anyone. So, like, if I'm the one who started like, oh, look at so and so's like, like table manners are terrible. It's like, yeah, it's like you shouldn't be doing that. Has anybody actually told them? Yeah, that's one thing. But if I don't say anything and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't believe your mother is like this, or your sister is so rude, or I can't believe you hang out with that guy. What the hell's wrong? What the hell's wrong with him? It's like, well, what the hell's wrong with you? So it's like, why are you insulting my friends that way? It's like, I've known this particular person for a long, long time. It's like, do you think that that behavior is, uh, you know, insulting? It's like, or what's going on with that? What is wrong with that? Because I don't see anything. Uh, I don't see any problem with that. I don't know. It's just one of those things in which it leads to a conversation that doesn't necessarily go well because if because my friends and family are very important to me, and if you don't like them, then that could be your express train out of the relationship.
Get to
So
stepping.
get out.
So, my third red flag was, and this is pretty common actually,
Yeah, yeah. This one.
when the person projects ex-boyfriend girlfriend damage onto you, right? So like they got cheated on by someone, so that means you're gonna cheat, right? They bring that. I mean, everyone has baggage, right? If you've been in relationships and you had bad times, you tend to carry it with you to the point when you can put it down. And sometimes that's just from, emotionally growing, or meeting someone who doesn't treat you that poorly and saying, okay, this can be better. But, uh, if your ex was super controlling and, needed to know where you were at all times, and if you didn't check in with them by texting or calling at a certain time, you were in big trouble, that kind of stuff. Not all people are like that. And for you to go into a new relationship and like put that onto the next person, and to, and it doesn't have to show up in the exact way, right? But you could just be really insecure and put all that insecurity into the relationship. Or uh you could have a lot of anger left over for it, and you could just be dumping that anger onto your new partner, and that's not fair to them either. So, I just think people should be more conscious of this, that they don't bring that into their future relationships, uh, because it can and will show up as a red flag to that person.
So that's a very good point, and that one's a common one because, you know. that paranoia that we've talked about in the first topic sets in, and it could harm future relationships that you could end up having until they get over that. Honestly, the fourth one's more of a pet peeve of mine than anything else, but it leads to some terrible things, and that's changes in availability without short notice. Of all of a sudden, the person is not telling you where they're going, or they want to hang out, or you've done something that has been normal between the two. Then all of a sudden, she's like, "No, I can't do that anymore," and doesn't explain what is going on. That is a little difficult to sort of understand. And to me, it's just like a little thing that says, it's like, I don't know what's going on here, but this doesn't seem right. And it's more one of those like, oh, it perks my red flag ear up. Could be nothing. Could be work is just being a total bitch. Could be that the person just because of other life experiences needs to be left alone for a while. But it's one of those things in which if it happens too often, it could be something or a sign of long-term damage in your relationship. So that one
Right.
requires a lot of talking, I think. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's I mean, just flaky behavior in general can be a big red flag saying, this person's not giving you heads up or, dropping plans. Like it means that they don't respect you
yeah,
enough to consider you. So that kind of person, like the previous one, can get to step in.
get to step in.
So my number four, this one, I mean, I had definitely had experience with this in the past, but um, it's sort of like an inconsistency with the way that the person describes himself and then the actions that they take, right? So if a person's like, "Oh, I'm so punctual. I'm always on time," that kind of thing, and then they show up late all the time, or
Yeah.
you know, or they are talking about how they are just so empathetic and understanding, and like I'm such like my EQ is so high, and they're like a brick when it comes, something emotional comes up, and they just, they can't help you at all, or they can't relate to you at all. Um, if a person, you know, e- everyone has some of these inconsistencies, but if a person is really unaware of who they are, to me, that's a red flag. If they're not aware of what they bring to the table and what uh, who they are, what they offer,
Hmm.
then I'm less likely to be drawn in and to want to be close to them.
Yeah,
But that's just a personal one.
yeah. Well, my final one uh, is a little weird one. I sort of have to explain this one a little bit, but trying too hard or being too involved in things you like. Now, I've never had a stalker before, and I this is a weird start to this conversation, but I just find that if somebody is all up in your business from the very get go, or is very involved in things that all of a sudden you've never seen her at before and is all of a sudden there, um, no. To me, is you have to be yourself, and for someone to be up in your business all the time, all of a sudden, and being very pressed about what you are doing and your likes shows me that that particular person might be like Acorn's number one, have no friends and not be able to sort of be alone in a way. Sort of, and I keep using my verbal crutch, not have the ability to find something that he or she likes by themselves. Because in a relationship, there are going to be things that you like, there are going to be things that your partner doesn't like. And that's okay. Everything doesn't need to be both of us all the time, 100%. Doesn't happen that way. You would end up smothering yourselves. Some people find that that is exactly what they need in a relationship. Good for them. But from my personal view, if the other person does not have a set amount of things that he or she can necessarily like sort of fall back on for hobbies or things that would interest them without depending on you having to do it too. I'm sorry, that is not in a way I think in any way healthy, because I think everybody just needs some personal time for themselves, and they need to have their likes and their dislikes be personal and not necessarily based on what their partner thinks. I don't know if I've actually worded that correctly, but that was my fifth red flag, was just not having a lot of business of your own, in a way, sort of like
Yeah,
personal likes
I
and
get
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so my number five is actually something I already kind of mentioned before when talking about the X damage, but uh, controlling behavior is it's just unwelcome in any relationship that I have. Uh, I don't try to tell people how to live their lives. I mean, here I am on Twitch giving a relationship advice, but I'm not I'm not coming over to your house and, you know, throwing out pictures of your ex because that's not good for you, right? I I think that you can make suggestions to people. You can, offer your input, whatever. But like, I don't think trying to control their world is healthy. And when someone gets into a relationship and they think that not only they're so right, but that they need to be the puppet master and to say where you go, when you go there, who you're with, who you're not allowed to talk to, these kind of behaviors are just they're just very unhealthy, and they don't some people say I need to do this otherwise I feel jealousy or whatever, some other negative feelings, but honestly those behaviors feed into that jealousy. And so I think controlling behavior in general is very negative and actually furthers the problems that cause it in the first place. So uh, I've done my best to avoid these kind of people,
Hmm.
but these things happen, and sometimes they happen in small ways. Sometimes if you're in a long-term relationship or you're married or whatever, you have to let the other person have some control, and that's fine. It's part of making a negotiation and compromise. But in general, if you find that you no longer have agency over your day-to-day and that you are not able to maintain the connections that you want to maintain, someone is probably too much up in your business. So,
Yeah.
red flag,
Yeah.
see ya.
And the thing about controlling behavior, it can be both men and women, right? Like, I mean, that's not.
All of these things can
Yeah,
be both men and women.
both. Yeah, exactly. So this is not unique to a particular sex, race, gender. I mean, like, it's
Shape.
everyone. Shape, person, you name it. I mean, this is just in general what we both have decided are items that we should be wary of, and having those red flags are very, very important to everyone, and they are based on personal experience. So what my red flag could be something completely different to somebody else. Somebody might be like, "Oh, I love it when my significant other is in all of my hobbies and participating in all of my things." It's like that's my dream. Okay, good for you. It's not mine. So it's like, all right, I like it if she likes some stuff, but I just find it weird if she likes everything. So,
Do
yeah.
you think that it would be a good idea for people to write out a list of the red flags like this person's doing, or do you think that it's not? Like when I saw this, my first thought was like, don't most people just do this internally? Don't they just have their ideas and feelings about what's a red flag for them? And then I kind of recognized that she was trying to get some feedback on it and also maybe share her experience with other people. So that I get, and that's kind of what we're doing here with ours.
Yeah, yeah.
But for the most part, don't you think this is sort of like an internal thing?
It's definitely an internal thing. But the thing about it is it's also to a point, she's trying to justify her decision making. Like, the some of the stuff is really personal, like the stuff about the contraception and not liking anybody that complains about wearing a condom. Um, that's very specific to her, and I can understand that. But she might say, like, some people might be like, well, I'm Catholic, and that's we don't use any contraception, period, because that's a religious choice. and it doesn't
Right.
necessarily match up with stuff with that. So, like, uh, that could be a reason. But she's also, I think, uh, you
Oh
know,
yeah, I don't mean
mhm.
her specifically. I'm more talking about like our viewers.
Oh
So
yeah,
do you think that they should go on and sit down and write out their red flags? Do you think that's useful for them? Do you think they should talk about it with their friends and get feedback? Or is
I
it just an internal?
I think it might be helpful for people who are not experienced in relationships possibly, but a lot of the times the people who have red flags are experienced, but I think maybe you just internalize it. You don't necessarily have to justify them all. I think they're all personal choices in the end, and everybody's allowed to believe in their red flags one way or another. But should I write them down and always ask you? It's like, hey Tim, I've got a new red flag, and it's this. What do you think? It's like, no, no, you don't need to I don't need You shouldn't really be looking for like justification on what your red flags are. Your red flags are your red flags.
I would
Yeah.
say
Mhm.
if a person is convincing themselves out of every single relationship that they're getting into because all they see is red flags, then maybe that's the point when you start asking other people to chime in and make sure that it's not that bad.
But that's
Uh,
different though. I mean, like if you're I don't know if you're asking them specifically about the red flags, but when you are quote using your red flags to get out of a quote relationship or something like that, maybe you don't ask about the red flags, but what your friends think of a particular person that you're dating. Um, you maybe bring up some of the things like, well, he doesn't like cats. That's a red flag for me, and all these other things, and it's like, no, he doesn't like pets. Okay, whatever. He doesn't like the color blue. Whatever. Like these are. Maybe you do ask about some of the justifications with regards to why you're leaving a relationship, but your personal preferences are your personal preferences. I don't think anybody. I don't think anybody. Everybody can have an opinion about them, but they're still yours. I
no,
mean,
man. If someone says that I can't be with someone because they don't like the color blue, like forget you.
yeah,
Go go lift a rock and climb underneath it,
yeah.
because
I don't know. Those are bad examples. I mean, like
yeah, no, I just messing with you.
the what is it? The one of them was we had a friend who was dating a girl that didn't shave her legs. Oh no no no! I'm sorry. That was one other friend that we were like, but there was the one where her thumbs bent really weirdly, and he could. That was a red flag to him, and he had to break off the relationship. And we're like, okay.
Shame about them thumbs.
Same about them thumbs, but um, you do you, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's the type of situation. That's a real situation that really happened, and
Right, and he's
it's
still really single. So, I mean, I'm not gonna say A leads to B necessarily,
yeah,
but when your red flags don't have meaning and aren't actually protecting you,
yeah,
then yeah, you're just kind of being weird.
yeah, yeah. It is really true, and we're gonna end our show on that. So
All right.
don't be weird. That's, I guess, what we're saying.
I don't
Whatever.
know what we're saying anymore. It's late tonight, so I think it's best to wrap it up now.
Exactly. So let us
Appreciate
do our business. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, just appreciate everyone who popped by tonight to check us out here. We are looking to gather followers, so if you can click follow here and get us up, we're trying to push to 50 so that we can become bona fide and you know affiliated and whatnot. Uh, we do this out of the love of our hearts. We're really just on here hanging out, two friends, sharing our experience, and if anyone out there does have a question that they want to have us go over, talk about, send us an email at twitchlinelove@gmail.com or tweet us at Twitchline, and we will get back to you. And
So,
the more information you can give us, the better we can do with getting you some real advice. Um, we will be here every Wednesday night. Usually start at 10:30 Eastern. Tonight we started a bit late, but that won't be regular. And then on Sunday, we do a more focused episode where we pick one topic and kind of go deep on it. people are always welcome to drop in a chat, say hi, share some other experiences, and ask questions. And we love all that we can get from you. So please do come and join us.
Yep. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel down below where you can click on that, where you can see all previous episodes of Twitchline. And it's also a great way of streaming it in the car. If you don't get a chance to catch our live show, it's a great way to stream it in the car, and we can act as your personal podcast as you go in and out of work or run errands in the car. And that's a great way to experience us if you don't have the time to watch our live stream. But that is going to do it for us. Tim, it's always been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, man. Good
Yeah.
times.
All
Can't
right.
wait for the next one.
All right. Kea, absolutely. And thank you for watching. This has been a presentation of Twitchline. So we'll catch you on Sunday. We'll have a topic where we can focus on something, and hopefully you find that informational. But for Tim, I'm Hodo Z. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Good night. Mwah.